My name is Sloane Parker, and for 5 years, my boss stood on stage and accepted awards for work I did in a cubicle at 2 a.m. His name was Victor Crane, Senior Vice President of Client Strategy at Whitford and Chase, one of the biggest marketing firms in Chicago. Victor was handsome in a generic way, spoke in polished sound bites, and owned exactly 3 expressions: the firm handshake, the thoughtful nod, and the smile that never reached his eyes. Everyone above him loved him. Everyone below him feared him. And everyone at his level knew exactly what he was. But he was too useful to the bottom line for anyone to care. For 5 years, I wrote the strategies. I built the pitch decks. I stayed late, skipped lunches, and missed my mom's chemotherapy appointments because Victor needed one more revision before the morning meeting. And every single time, he walked into that boardroom, clicked to my first slide, and said, "So, I've been thinking." 5 years, hundreds of stolen ideas, dozens of awards, and one promotion after another. For him, never for me. But last Thursday, everything changed. A client worth $20 million walked into the conference room. Victor did his usual performance. Confident, polished, entirely fraudulent. He clicked through slides I'd built at 3 a.m. He spoke words I'd written in a coffee shop while my mom was in surgery. And then the client, a quiet woman in her 60s named Miriam Ashford, raised her hand and asked a question Victor couldn't answer. Not even close. He stumbled. He flipped through notes. He looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in 5 years, his eyes wide with panic. The room went silent. And I realized in that single frozen moment that I finally had a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back 6 years to a rainy Tuesday in Chicago when I walked into Whitford and Chase for the very first time. I was 26 years old when I interviewed at Whitford and Chase, and I was terrified. Not the normal kind of interview nerves, the deep, bone-level terror of someone who had run out of options. My mom, Diane, had been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer 4 months earlier. The treatments were brutal. The bills were worse. My father had left when I was 12, moved to Phoenix with a woman named Cheryl, and started a new family that sent Christmas cards but never Christmas presents. It was just me and Mom. It had always been just me and Mom. I'd graduated from Northwestern with a degree in marketing and a minor in data analytics. Good grades, solid internships. But the job market in Chicago was brutal, and I'd been rejected from 14 positions in 3 months. Too young, not enough experience. We're looking for someone with a more traditional background, which I eventually learned was code for "we want a man." Whitford and Chase was my 15th interview. The office was on the 34th floor of a glass tower on Wacker Drive. The lobby smelled like expensive leather and fresh orchids. The receptionist had cheekbones that could cut glass and a phone system that looked like it could launch a spacecraft. I sat in the waiting area, clutching a portfolio of my work: campaign strategies, market analyses, a rebrand proposal for a failing coffee chain that had become my obsession project. I'd worn my best blazer, a navy thing from a consignment shop that was slightly too big in the shoulders. Victor Crane interviewed me first. He was 38 then, already a VP, already polished to a high shine. He sat across from me with his perfectly pressed shirt and his Mont Blanc pen and asked me questions that felt more like traps than conversations. "You went to Northwestern," he said, scanning my resume like it was a menu he wasn't sure he wanted to order from. "Good school, but we typically recruit from Ivy League for strategy roles. What makes you think you can compete? I don't think I can compete, I said. I know I can. Give me a problem and I'll solve it. That's not a resume line. That's just who I am. He raised an eyebrow, made a note. I couldn't tell if it was a good note or a bad one. The second interview was with Eleanor Whitford herself, the firm's founder, a woman in her 70s with silver hair cut sharp as a blade and eyes that seemed to see through walls. She was terrifying in a completely different way than Victor. He was polished insecurity. She was pure distilled competence. Victor thinks you're too green, Eleanor said, leaning back in her chair. He told me to pass. My heart dropped. Oh. But I don't hire based on what Victor thinks. She picked up my portfolio, my actual portfolio, the one I'd brought in my hands, and tapped it with one finger. You did this rebrand proposal? For the coffee chain? Yes, ma'am. They're our client. We've been trying to crack their rebrand for 18 months. Your proposal is better than anything our senior team has produced. She set the portfolio down and looked at me. I'm going to hire you, Sloane, but I'm going to warn you. Victor will try to take credit for your work. He does it to everyone. Are you prepared to handle that? I was 26. I needed the job. My mom needed the health insurance. I would have agreed to anything. I can handle it, I said. Eleanor smiled, a small, knowing smile that I would understand much better 5 years later. We'll see. You start Monday. The first time Victor stole my work, I didn't even realize it was happening. It was my 3rd month at the firm. I'd been assigned to a project for a regional airline that was bleeding customers to competitors. I spent 3 weeks doing research, poring over customer surveys, analyzing route profitability, interviewing flight attendants and gate agents. I built a 40-page strategy document that proposed a complete repositioning. Not just new ads, a new identity. I gave the document to Victor on a Thursday afternoon. He flipped through it, nodded, and said, I'll take it from here. That Friday, he presented to the client. I wasn't invited to the meeting. Junior strategists rarely were. But I watched through the glass walls of the conference room as he clicked through my slides, my charts, my language. He even used a joke I'd written in the margins. The client loved it. Victor got a bonus. My name was never mentioned. Afterward, he walked past my cubicle and paused. Good work on the airline research, he said. Useful background material. Background material. Not strategy, not the core idea, just background material. I sat at my desk that evening, staring at my computer screen, and I had a choice. I could confront him, demand credit, make a scene, or I could accept it, learn from it, and figure out how to use the situation to my advantage. I chose the second option, not because I was weak, because I was strategic. My mom had just started her 2nd round of chemo. The firm's health insurance was covering 80% of the costs. If I lost my job, she lost her treatment. It was that simple. So I stayed quiet, and I started keeping records. Over the next 5 years, the pattern repeated itself so many times I lost count. Victor would assign me a project. I'd do the work, the research, the strategy, the creative brief. He'd present it as his own. He'd get the credit, the bonuses, the promotions. I'd get more work. And I was good, really good. The strategies I developed brought in millions of dollars in new business. The airline repositioning I'd done in my 3rd month, it became a case study that Victor presented at industry conferences. He was quoted in trade publications. He was named one of Chicago's top 40 under 40 by a business magazine, and in the profile, he talked about his innovative approach to client strategy. I read that profile in the hospital waiting room while my mom was in surgery. The irony was so sharp, I almost laughed. But I was also learning. I was building relationships with clients, quietly, carefully. I'd stay after meetings and answer questions Victor couldn't. I'd send follow-up emails with additional context that clients found more useful than Victor's polished presentations. I was building a reputation, not with the firm's leadership, but with the people who actually paid the bills. And I kept my records, every email, every draft with timestamps, every strategy document with my digital fingerprints all over it. I saved them in a folder on my personal cloud drive labeled Insurance. My mom asked me once, during a good week when the chemo wasn't wiping her out completely, why I stayed at a job where I was invisible. Because right now, invisible pays the bills, I said. But I'm not going to be invisible forever, Mom. I promise. She squeezed my hand. I know you're not, baby. You're my daughter. You're incapable of being invisible. She died 6 months later, on a Tuesday, quietly, in her sleep, with my hand in hers. At her funeral, Victor sent a flower arrangement and a card that said, "Take all the time you need, but the Henderson pitch is due Friday." I took 2 days. Then I went back to work, and I started preparing for the moment I knew was coming. The Ashford Group was the biggest client Whitford and Chase had ever pursued. Miriam Ashford had built a luxury hospitality empire from a single bed and breakfast in Vermont. Now she owned 14 boutique hotels across the country, and she was looking for a marketing firm to handle a complete rebrand. New identity, new digital presence, new everything. The contract was worth $20 million over 3 years. 5 firms were competing for the business. Whitford and Chase was the underdog. We were the smallest firm in the running, going up against agencies with offices in New York, London, and Tokyo. Victor saw it as his legacy moment. If he landed the Ashford account, he'd make executive vice president, maybe even managing partner. He'd been talking about it for months. The Ashford play, he called it, like it was a football game and he was the quarterback. He assigned me the strategy. Of course he did. I spent 6 weeks on it. I visited 3 of Ashford's hotels. I interviewed guests, staff, managers. I analyzed their booking data, their review patterns, their social media sentiment. I found something no one else had noticed. Ashford's most loyal customers weren't luxury travelers. They were middle-class families celebrating special occasions, anniversaries, graduations, once-in-a-lifetime trips. The brand wasn't about exclusivity. It was about meaningful moments. I built the entire pitch around that insight. Not luxury, legacy. That was the tagline. The idea that an Ashford stay wasn't about showing off. It was about creating memories that lasted. Victor loved it. "This is it," he said, flipping through the deck. "This is the one." "Will I be in the room for the pitch?" I asked. He looked at me like I'd asked to borrow his car. "It's a senior-level presentation, Sloane. I'll handle it. But I'll mention your contributions." He'd never mentioned my contributions. Not once. Not in 5 years. I nodded, smiled, and went back to my cubicle, where I opened my insurance folder and made sure everything was in order. The pitch meeting was on a Thursday at 10 a.m. in the main conference room, the one with the river view and the $40,000 conference table and the espresso machine that required a trained operator. Miriam Ashford arrived with 3 members of her executive team. She was smaller than I'd expected, A compact woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and a quiet intensity. She didn't smile when she shook hands. She didn't make small talk. She sat at the head of the table, folded her hands, and said, "Impress me." Victor launched into his performance. He was good. I had to admit he was good. He'd rehearsed the pitch until he could deliver it in his sleep. He clicked through my slides with practiced ease. He used my language, my insights, my tagline. Not luxury, legacy. Miriam's expression didn't change. She took notes on a small leather pad. She didn't ask questions during the presentation. She just watched, listened, waited. When Victor finished, 45 minutes of my work, delivered flawlessly by a man who'd contributed nothing, Miriam removed her glasses and set them on the table. "That was very polished, Mr. Crane," she said. "But I have one question." "Of course," Victor said, his confident smile firmly in place. "Your central insight, that our customers aren't luxury travelers, but middle-class families celebrating meaningful moments, that's quite specific. Can you walk me through the data analysis that led you to that conclusion? Specifically, how you segmented the customer review sentiment across income brackets?" Victor's smile froze. I knew the answer. Of course I knew the answer. I'd spent 3 weeks on that analysis alone. I'd built a custom sentiment analysis model that cross-referenced review language with booking data. I'd pulled 3 consecutive all-nighters to get the numbers right. Victor hadn't read the appendix. He didn't even know there was an appendix. "Well," he said, flipping through his notes, "the data analysis was quite extensive. We used a multivariable approach." "Which variables?" Miriam asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Victor looked at me. Just for a second. Just a flicker. But it was enough. I saw panic in his eyes. Real, genuine panic. The kind of panic that comes from being caught in a lie you've been telling for years. "The sentiment analysis used 6 variables," I said, my voice steady. "Review text keyword density, booking price point relative to market average, repeat stay frequency, occasion tagging from comment cards, net promoter score by demographic segment, and seasonal booking patterns. The key finding was that guests in the $75,000 to $125,000 income bracket, not the luxury bracket, were 3.2 times more likely to mention words like anniversary, once in a lifetime, and always remember in their reviews. That's where the legacy insight came from." The room went completely silent. Miriam turned to me. "And you are?" "Sloane Parker," I said. "Senior strategist. I led the data analysis for this pitch." Victor's face drained of color. "Sloane contributed to the research," he said quickly. "But the strategy came from the data," Miriam interrupted. She was looking at me now. Really looking. "Miss Parker, why are you sitting in the back row?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The Ashford group didn't make a decision that day. Miriam shook my hand before she left, not Victor's, mine, and said, "I look forward to our next conversation, Miss Parker." Victor didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. He locked himself in his office with the blinds drawn. I could see his silhouette through the frosted glass, pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. The next morning, I was called to Eleanor Whitford's office. Eleanor sat behind her desk, the same silver-haired woman who'd hired me 5 years earlier. But this time, her expression wasn't terrifying. It was satisfied. "I spoke with Miriam Ashford last night," Eleanor said. "She told me what happened in the meeting. She also told me that if you're not the lead strategist on her account, She's taking her business elsewhere. I felt the room shift slightly, like the floor had tilted. Victor has been suspended, pending a review, Eleanor continued. It turns out your insurance folder, which I've been aware of for quite some time, contains documentation of a pattern of intellectual property theft going back 5 years. Victor's attorneys are currently negotiating his exit from the firm.
You knew? I whispered. You knew what he was doing? Eleanor removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. I suspected, but I needed proof. And I needed a client willing to go on the record. You gave me both. She leaned forward. I hired you because I saw something in you, Sloane. But I also hired you because I knew this day would come. You've been building a case against Victor since your first month here. I've been building one against him for a decade. You just didn't know we were on the same team. I sat there, absorbing the weight of what she was saying. For 5 years, I thought I was invisible. I thought no one was watching. I thought the sacrifice of my credit, my recognition, my pride, all of it was happening in the shadows. But Eleanor Whitford had been watching the whole time, waiting, gathering her own evidence, using me as the final piece of a puzzle she'd been solving for years. Victor's exit package includes a non-disclosure agreement and a non-compete that will effectively end his career in this industry, Eleanor said. The Ashford account, if we win it, will be yours to lead. And the senior vice president position Victor is vacating? She smiled. I think you've earned it. I started to cry. Not the ugly sobs of grief. Those had come and gone in the months after my mom died. These were different. These were tears of relief, tears of validation, tears of finally being seen. Don't cry, Eleanor said, handing me a tissue. You're a senior vice president now. Senior vice presidents don't cry until they get to their own office. I laughed through the tears. I don't have an office. You do now. She slid a key across the desk. Corner office, Riverview. And it's 3 doors down from Victor's old one, so you'll have the pleasure of walking past his empty desk every morning. 3 weeks later, the Ashford Group signed the contract. $22 million. $2 million more than the original scope, because Miriam Ashford had added an additional brand experience division to the project. She specifically requested that I lead it. The announcement went out in the industry trades. Whitford and Chase named Sloane Parker as senior vice president. There was a photo of me, shaking hands with Eleanor. No Victor, no mention of Victor. Just my face, my name, and a quote about bringing authentic, data-driven strategy to the firm's most prestigious accounts. Victor's departure was announced on a Friday afternoon, buried in a press release about organizational restructuring. He was moving to a smaller firm in Indianapolis. Not a competitor, not a threat, just gone. I moved into my new office on a Monday. The Riverview was even better than Eleanor had promised. The Chicago skyline stretched out before me, glass and steel and possibility. I hung a photo of my mom on the wall, the one from her 50th birthday, when she was still healthy, still laughing, still capable of believing that everything would work out. Look at us, Mom, I whispered. We made it. I think about her every day. I think about the years I spent invisible, the late nights, the stolen credit, the quiet fury of being erased while someone else claims my life's work. I think about the moment in that conference room when Miriam Ashford asked a question only I could answer, and the silence that followed. That silence was my revenge. Not loud, not dramatic, just true. The truth
spoken clearly in a room full of people who couldn't ignore it anymore. But here's what I've learned, and here's why I'm telling you this story. Revenge isn't really about the other person. It's about you. It's about refusing to be erased. It's about keeping your records, doing your work, building your case. Not out of bitterness, but out of belief. Belief that one day the truth will find its moment. And when it does, you'll be ready. Victor Crane is in Indianapolis now, working at a firm no one's heard of, managing accounts no one cares about. He sends me LinkedIn requests sometimes. I never accept. I'm in the corner office now. The river is beautiful this time of year. And somewhere in a cloud drive, labeled insurance, there's a folder I'll never need again. But I'm keeping it anyway. As a reminder. The best revenge isn't loud. It's patient. It's prepared. It waits until the right question is asked, and then it speaks the truth. Calmly, clearly, in a voice that can't be ignored. That's my story. If it made you feel something, anger, hope, satisfaction, or even just a little less alone, then it did what I hoped it would. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever been invisible in a room full of people who should have seen you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you here for the next one. Check the description for more stories like this.